Hello everyone, Namaskar and Jai Hind. Welcome to National Security Live episode 10. Today we are going to discuss a subject that sits at the intersection of foreign policy, of civil society, about governance, sovereignty, and also about national security. So we are going to discuss about foreign funding or foreign influence. It is related to FCRA, that is Foreign Contribution Regulatory Act, the proposed amendment, and national security. So the question is here whether the NGOs, the non-government organizations, should they receive foreign funding or not? It is not the question. The real question is at what point can foreign funding become a foreign influence? When foreign funding converts to foreign influence, there's the problem. And perhaps actually the most important thing is that the most important question is that can a democratic country can protect itself from foreign influence without damaging legitimate civil society? So this is the debate surrounding the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act Amendment 2026. So let's go ahead with today's discussion. But before begin today, I would like to request everyone kindly switch to 1.5x and please comment below whether you like my avatar or not. If you like this avatar, I will go with this kind of avatar itself. So thank you for joining me. Let's begin. So what exactly is FCRA? Let's start with the basic. What is FCRA? FCRA is not a simple law which says that foreign money is bad. It actually doesn't say that foreign money is bad. FCRA is actually a regulatory framework which actually governs the acceptance and utilization of foreign contribution and the contribution of foreign hospitality. The 2010 Amendment Act, it expressly seeks to prevent foreign contribution from being used for activities which is actually detrimental to India's national interest. It was actually amended during UPA 2 era, during the Home Ministership of P. Chidambaram Saab, I think, as far I can remember, in 2010. So the underlying national security question is quite straightforward. Here, this act actually analyzes who is giving the money or who is receiving it, how much money is actually coming and where it is going, and most importantly, what is ultimately being it used for, where the money is used for. It is a big deal that this act actually analyzes or questions. If we actually go to the history of FCRA, the story actually begins much earlier during emergency era. In 1976, India introduced the original Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in 1976. The concern was actually foreign influence over India's domestic political and institutional processes. So it evolved from 1976. And the new FCRA came into place in 2010 during UPA 2 government. The new framework came into place. One major sense that the registration become the time bound. In new FCRA in 2010, the registration has become time bound. Generally, it required renewal every 5 years. 2010 and registration, it says that 2010 amendment and the new FCRA, it emphasized on the time bound registration. That means every 5 years the registration expires. The law also strengthened the regulation of foreign contribution and their utilization. Then come major turning point. Again, after the NDA government come in 2020, there come another amendment. In 2020 amendment, it significantly again tightened the framework. Among other changes, the measure was like foreign contribution had to be received through a SBI, through a State Bank of India FCRA designated account. It should be on a particular branch of State Bank of India, and it should be an FCRA account. The transfer of foreign contribution to another person was prohibited. If you are getting foreign money, if you are getting foreign contribution through NGOs, the transfer of the money to a particular person is actually prohibited from that bank account. Here also, the other changes like administrative expense ceiling was reduced from 50% to 20%. Before it was 50%, the administrative expense, the office expense, etc. But it has to be below 20% as per the 2020 framework of FCRA. Government oversight was also strengthened through this 2020 amendment. So the basic philosophy of that 2020 amendment was like foreign funding must be traceable, it was to be accountable and purpose specific. For whatever purpose the foreign funding was coming by document, it has to be spent on that particular purpose. So this actually brings us to today's debate. Why is this a national security issue? Why this foreign funding can lead to foreign influence, and why it becomes a national security issue? Imagine, let's go with a hypothetical situation. Let's say a foreign organization which provides substantial funding to an Indian non-governmental organization. The organization that receives foreign contribution, it actually politically active in some sensitive areas. The particular Indian organization, it produces reports, it conducts various political campaigns, and even it influences public discourse. It interacts with policymakers, and also it builds networks. The particular NGO or organization or trust, it actually builds networks. So none of these activities, these are not automatically illegal. Like to conduct campaigns or produce reports, or maybe to be politically active for an NGO, to build network even, it's not actually illegal. But if we look it into from national security perspective, we have to ask some questions like, could foreign financial dependency create foreign strategic influence? Whether the person who, whether the organization or particular individual who is sending money to that particular organization, whether he is or she is, or that particular foreign organization or that particular foreign body is trying to influence something through that money, that's a big question. Because modern national security, it's not about, again, it's not about tanks, as I have already mentioned. It's not about missiles, borders, army, navy, air force. It's not just about that. It's about influence, it's about narrative, it's about information, of course, it's about network, even about public opinion, and ultimately the question is that who has the ability to influence them, who has the ability to influence the narrative, who has the ability to influence network, to influence public opinion, like we have seen in recent CJP protest. Who has the ability to influence public opinion? Some organizations, some certain Instagram accounts, maybe certain news or media houses, maybe certain individuals. So these people have the ability to influence public opinion. If we now come to the NGO question, sorry, we must be black and white about something, that NGOs actually, they do not mean anti-national. Okay, a lot more people think that NGOs can be anti-national. No, NGOs are not anti-national. That should be an intellectually lazy argument if someone says NGOs are anti-national. Actually, most of the NGOs most of the mushrooming NGOs were doing some work or engaging in some work, and or engaging in some practices which were not for the nation building activities. So they were mostly portrayed in that way. India actually has thousands of legitimate NGOs working in healthcare, in education, even in poverty reduction, in disaster relief, environmental protection, maybe in scientific research also, in humanitarian assistance also, in social welfare. So foreign funding here can play a legitimate role in many of these activities. The national security concern actually arises when there is evidence of unlawful diversion of the fund, the concealment of the fund, or the financial irregularities, maybe political interference or other activities which are prohibited by law. So rather than saying that NGOs are national security threat, the better question is, can foreign funded organizations or can foreign funded NGOs become channel of foreign influence under certain circumstances maybe? Probably yes. That is precisely why countries regulate foreign influence. Here, India is not alone. Look outside India, the United States of America, it has the Foreign Agent Registration Act, or FARA. It was enacted in 1938. FARA, it requires certain agents acting for foreign principals to actually disclose their relationship activities and financial information. That is FARA, which is a very strong law. On the other hand, in United Kingdom, in the England, in UK, it has gone further, a somewhat different direction. If foreign influence registration scheme, or FIRS, in the UK under the National Security Act 2023, it's actually requires registration of certain arrangements involving foreign states and influence activities. So in UK, if you have to send money for certain welfare or certain activities, you have to have registration under National Security Act 2023 and under Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, that is FIRS. So this is just the example of two states, that is USA and UK. All the states, all the major states having such laws. Even we have some examples like there is various, there's a big hue and cry that Harvard University is being funded by a certain evolving country, by a certain evolving superpower, to build narrative or to have research or to have biased research on certain directions. So Harvard University is being actually funded by a foreign entity. So it's a big questions even in the United States. It's a big debate. It's a big security threat even in the United States. So these laws like Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA in United States deals with that. In UK, Foreign Influence Registration Scheme of National Security Act 2023, it deals with such foreign fundings. So in India, we do have FCRA. It was done in originally 1976, amended in 2010, also amended in 2020, and now a new amendment is coming. So coming to FCRA 2026 amendment, this is where today's episode it becomes particularly important, because in 2026 India is proposing another significant change, that is foreign contribution, I quote, regulation, unquote, Amendment Bill 2026, that is Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill 2026. It was actually introduced on 25th March of 2026. And one of its most important proposal is the creation of a designated authority. So what is designated authority? This bill proposes a statutory framework for the vesting, supervision, and management, also disposal of foreign contribution and assets where an organization's FCRA certificate ceases. If an organization's FCRA certificate ceases to exist, it expires, or its renewal is declined, then the assets supervision and management of that particular NGO or that particular organization will be vested on a designated government authority. This new amendment proposes for such a designated authority. So the big question in the recent amendment is coming, like what happens when a FCRA certificate ceases. So under the new proposed FCRA framework, a certificate can cease in various circumstances, maybe like failure to apply for renewal. If an organization fails to apply for renewal, maybe if even though if it applies for renewal, it is refused in certain grounds. If it also fails to renew before the expiry, then also it ceases to exist. The FCRA registration ceases to exist. So the new bill proposes a section 14B, a new section called section 14B, which deals with cessation of registration. And there come the controversial part. Foreign contribution and assets created from the foreign contribution, it can become the subject of vesting in the designated authority. If designated authority wants, if the license is revoked or it's expired, the designated authority has the power. The designated authority is vested with such and such power that it can take over the assets or management of that particular organization. Initially, this can be provisional. If registration is restored or renewed, the bill actually provides for restoration of the relevant assets and unused foreign contribution back to that organization after it again got registered in FCRA. The all assets will be transferred back. But if registration is not restored within the prescribed period, permanent vesting can be there. The bill goes for a permanent vesting or permanent transfer of assets and properties towards the nation or maybe towards that designated authority. So what happens to these assets? If it happens, what happens to such assets? The proposed framework allows permanently vested assets to be used for public purposes. If certain organization with FCRA ceases its certification or having an expired FCRA certifications, its assets which was like its assets which came through foreign contributions, this will be after some time or after the certain period, it will be used for public purposes through the designated authority. They may be transferred to government ministries, may be transferred to various departments, agencies, or various public institutions. They may also be disposed of with proceeds created by consolidated fund of India. But there is an interesting provision concerning the places of worship also. If a permanently vested asset is wholly or partly a place of worship, the authority must ensure that its religious character is maintained. If that property which comes from foreign contribution and if it is actually came under the designated authority, and even after a certain period the organization who was earlier controlling it, the NGO or other trust or any organization who came unable to renew their FCRA license, in that circumstances, if the asset is a place of worship, then the government, the authority must ensure that the religious character of that particular asset must be maintained. So these are very important aspect of new amendment for what there is so much hue and cry regarding this FCRA new bill. So there are several other important proposals like something like key functionaries. The bill also defines key functionaries more comprehensively. This includes like directors, partners, trustees, office bearers, also government body members and other responsible for management and control. There are mention of asset during suspension and organization whose registration is actually suspended. It would face restrictions on dealing with assets created from foreign contributions without prior central government approval actually. And what is prior permission? The bill actually proposes that foreign contribution received under prior permission must be received and utilized within the prescribed period. The contribution that actually received by that organization, if government gave them permission to receive them and to spend them in certain period, that organization must have to spend that spend the received amount within that prescribed period. So this is also an important segment. There is another one that is investigation. The bill also proposes that prior central government approval would be required before investigation for offenses under FCRA is initiated. The central government would go into investigation. It will go with various teams of investigations. If FCRA violation is done by that particular organization. Penalties is there. This is not a story of more punishment. The bill actually proposes reducing the maximum imprisonment for FCRA violations from 5 years to 1 year. Even now, the punishment earlier it was 5 years for FCRA violations of functionaries, but now it is actually reducing to 1 year. So the bill simultaneously it strengthens administrative control over foreign funded assets while rationalizing some criminal penalties. The 2026 rules or FCRA Amendment Rule 2026 were notified on 22nd June 2026 and they are already in force actually. The revised framework include more specific requirement concerning the purpose and geographical area of operation mentioned in FCRA registration. The geographical area is very important, area of operation is very important, or the domain of operation is very important here. The rules also introduced a benchmark concerning reasonable activity for maybe renewal purposes. An organization is deemed to have undertaken reasonable activity if it has utilized at least 10 lakhs of foreign contribution during the proceedings of 2 financial years, subject to applicable framework. So here is a minimum cap of 10 lakhs that the organization have to utilize for renewal purposes for the next. This is one of the renewal criteria. So this is very significant because compliance is actually no longer simply about the question like, did you receive foreign money legally? But it actually with the question, can you demonstrate continuing lawful and meaningful utilization of that foreign contribution that you are getting? It is not just whether you are getting it legally or not. It is about whether you are using it meaningfully. As simple as that. So why do you think that government wants such a strong control over that? There can be various arguments like foreign money can create dependency. Yes, this is also one argument. If an organization actually becomes heavily dependent on foreign funding, questions can arise like about external influence, whether that particular organization is actually influencing that particular activity, or that particular organization in India, is it being controlled by someone outside. That's a big deal. Another argument can be like financial networks, which actually which can be exploited. Any financial system can potentially be exploited, maybe through illicit financing, maybe fund diversion, or maybe concealed transfer, or maybe some kind of prohibited activities. And certain NGOs have been playing such roles as financial intermediaries. So that's all. I think there can be another arguments like influence warfare can be a new battlefield, and influence warfare through NGOs or through such foreign funding can be also a new paradigm of national security. So today's strategic competition it's not just restricted to territory, as we have learned earlier. It can evolve from funding to networks to narrative to maybe influence. So these are the arguments. Other arguments can be: is there transparency during such process of fund transfer from a foreign funding? Since transparency protects sovereignty, the government can actually legitimately argue if the money is legitimate, transparency should not be a problem. So government is right in that situation. If the money is legit, if it is used in legitimate way, why people are being afraid of that? That's a big deal. If you are doing very good work, if you are doing welfare work, if you are doing work good for people, as the NGOs has been advertising, we are doing this, we are for people, we are doing everything for humanitarian cause. Okay, we accept that. If your money is legitimate and if you have been using it for good cause, why need to hide? Come on, let's have transparency together. As government having transparency, you should have transparency too. As simple as that. So this is one side, as we have discussed. If we come to another side, it would be fair. If we come to another side, the opposite argument is also equally important. If an NGO is legitimate, if it is receiving foreign funding for humanitarian work, despite all that, its registration is suspended because of some regulation dispute, because of some paperwork. So what happens to such NGOs? Well, let's say if that NGO is particularly doing some, let's say that NGO having a hospital, okay, it's receiving foreign fund and it is doing really good work for the humanity. But due to some government paperwork, due to some new regulations, its registration is suspended. So what happens then? The hospital would not get fund. The hospital would be actually affected, and the humanitarian work they have been doing would be affected. A lot more people would be affected. Similarly, it may happen with a school. It may happen with a research institution. Maybe with a place of worship also it can happen. So an organization's assets may have been the organization asset. It may have been created partly using domestic donation or maybe partly by foreign contribution. But the bill does not actually address partly foreign funded assets. It questions, actually remains the mixed funding and proportional interest which will work in practice. This is very complex. Since there are mixed funding and assets which mixed funding, this is very difficult situations, and a lot more debate is actually needed here if we look into it from both sides. And the situation becomes very complicated when the mixed funding, both foreign funding and domestic funding, is utilized or spent to create an asset. So it becomes a big deal, and a lot more maybe refinement on the regulations or floating of that draft for pilot purposes in public domain for few months is actually necessary, so that people can have more arguments, experts and lawyers can have more views on it, and ultimately to make a better FCRA amendment as per the need of this country with respect to national security. So if we now look into national security versus civil society, we can actually arrive at a foundational dilemma, like how much control is necessary for national security. How much control is too much for democracy? This is also a big deal. How much control is too much for democracy? There can be too much control if we go through such rules or regulations. So national security cannot become a magic phrase to end every debate. We have to look into it. National security cannot be a magic phrase to just end every debate, okay? Like, we are doing this because of national security. We are doing this for state sovereignty. It is also not like that. Civil society autonomy cannot mean immunity from financial transparency either. This is also important. Even though you are a civil society and you are autonomous, it doesn't mean that you will evade financial transparency. You have to have your transparency like government is transparent. So our challenge is to find the line. We have to find the line. So the big question is, if foreign money can influence politics, institutions, narratives, and society, should foreign funding be treated merely as a financial issue or national security issue? Just think about it. Maybe in another language, it can be like, should India move forward towards a system where foreign funding is not prohibited, but foreign influence becomes actually radically more transparent? Just think about it. So maybe perhaps the future of Foreign Contribution Regulation Act is not simply foreign funding regulation. It is increasingly becoming foreign influence regulation. The FCRA has been an instrument of influence regulation of foreign funding from the lens of national security. So as we are looking through the lens of national security is not only about protecting our borders. I have been saying that, not from foreign armies. Sometimes sovereignty can be challenged through money inflows, through influence, through information, sometimes through networks, and sometimes through lot more influence, lot more foreign powers. So the question is not here whether NGOs are good and bad. No. The real question is who funds them, for what purpose, under what influence, and with what consequences for national sovereignty. Whether the funds actually utilized for the exact purpose for what they are funded. So this is National Security Live episode 10. We today discussed about foreign funding or foreign influence, about FCRA Act and national security. I'm your host from Gyanonymous School. Here we find knowledge is strength and awareness is security. Jai Hind, Bande Mataram.